We are Ama La Vida. We are a life, health and wellness, leadership, and career coaching company. And my name is Justice, and I am a relationship strategist here. And what that means is when you have to talk to someone on our team, you have some goals that you want to start working towards, you'll have a half-hour complimentary conversation with someone on my team. And during that time, we're going to ask you some deeper questions to learn more about you, your current situation, and really what those goals are for yourself. And then at the end of that call, we will pair you up with a coach that we recommend based on their particular backgrounds, personality, skill sets, and just their ability that we have in them to coach you towards your goals. With all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and drop the link to my calendar right now. We're the brand new month, so we do have some times open, and it is first come, first serve if anyone is interested in that. Additionally, off that, anybody who comes to us from a webinar does get your first session free. So something to consider if you've been thinking about jumping into coaching. And with that being said, I will hand it over to you, Cait.
Thank you, Justice. And before we begin, I just want to say, because of my setup, my video will go away once I start sharing my slides, but I wanted to just do a quick little intro here before. Obviously, you've all signed up for the How to Recover from People Pleasing webinar. This is a really interesting topic that I think impacts all of us. Oh, thanks, Sharon. Oh, I really appreciate that. And then also just logistics. I'm going to be sharing some content. Please use the chat if you have questions. I want this to be interactive, even though I'm really big on information and want to share all the facts and the data and everything. I think that this is a topic that impacts, like I said, all of us and shows up slightly differently. So please be as engaged as you want to be. You're welcome to turn your cameras on. You're welcome to keep them off. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start sharing. Bear with me 1 second. Okay. So Jillian and Justice, can you see my screen?
Yes, we are good to go.
Perfect. Okay. How to recover from people pleasing. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of what this is, I think that it's really important to point out that most of us want to belong. And our need to please really stems from that need that we have as human beings for belonging. And so we find it painful when we're rejected, right? Which is why this behavior can sometimes feel like the default of human behavior. Kindness, being helpful, these are all virtues that we want to see in human beings. And then you pair that with our need to belonging. This sets up a recipe for this to happen. But what people pleasing is, just by pure definition, is when the need to please gets out of control and leads to self-sacrifice, right? I will point out that I myself am a recovering people pleaser. It's something that I work on constantly. I subscribed to this toxic mindset for years because I saw it equal success. I think we have a lot of people that we see do this and they amount to success. But I also see this a lot with my clients. And I think it's an important topic to bring up. And why I'm bringing it up today is because as leaders, if we're people pleasers, our need to be liked can actually impede our ability to influence in our lives. It can, if we're overly people pleasing everyone, we can overcommit ourselves, we can overextend ourselves. It can lead to, which I'm going to talk about today, some pretty complicated health risks. But I think what's important is that, really, people pleasing can take the form of overextending yourself, taking on too many tasks, giving away your energy, breaking your boundaries. And when left unchecked, it can really lead to anxiety and burnout and so much more. And so the first step to break this cycle is to really learn why we do it, and different strategies for overcoming it. And that is what I'm going to be talking about today. So as Justice mentioned in the beginning, we are Amala Vida. We are a coaching company. We are women owned. We serve people all around the world. And really our goal and our mission here is to help you love your life. And we support people through career leadership, life, and health coaching. Okay, so I'm Cait Swamy. I probably should have done this right at the beginning. I am a leadership, life, and career coach here with Amala Vida. I came into coaching through, I have an extensive career in leadership development, which is where I discovered what coaching is and that I was actually doing this all along. Went in to get my formal credentials to be a coach and found my way to Amala Vida. Since then, came in as a leadership coach, but have been able to touch pretty much all of our verticals since my time here, and I absolutely love what I do. Okay, so today's agenda, like I mentioned, we're going to talk about what people pleasing is, why we do it. I'm going to talk about some signals that you can and signs that you can look for to see if you're suffering from people pleasing. Sometimes it's not always super obvious to us. I'm going to talk about the risks of people pleasing. I think it's really important here to acknowledge that if we're going to be talking about people pleasing, we need to talk about how to say no. And then I'm going to leave with some tips and tricks to recover from people pleasing, which I found to be helpful not only for myself, but my clients. That'll be sort of a menu for you to choose from. And then we will have time for Q&A. So before we begin, I'd love to get some activity in the chat. And the question is, what does people pleasing mean to you? And you can bring up here any examples of people pleasers you've seen. You can talk about maybe when you do it, maybe when others have done it to you, but I'd love to just take a couple of moments here to see what comes up, and feel free to use the chat, or if you'd like to come off mute, I definitely invite you to do that as well. Jillian, feel free to chime in because I can't see the chat on my screen.
So we have, excuse me, tolerating dysfunction, doing what others want and not what I want. Always trying to make others happy, always saying yes, the inability to say no, putting others' needs above your own on a regular basis, making others a priority. Lots of people commenting kind of the same things, unable to say no, bypassing your own needs in order to keep an ongoing relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one that, I think yes to all of that. You were all right. You know, truly at the core, right? Putting others' needs before our own. And I also love that, you know, just saying yes to everything and not really honoring. I mean, what we're going to talk about a little bit today is like not even honoring your own boundaries and what's important to you, right? So yes to all of it. Jillian, were there any examples in there or any kind of comments around when people do it or when it's been done to them?
Just more comments on setting myself aside to ensure the goodness of others, lack of self-care and self-expression.
Yes.
Fear of disappointing others, offering to do something for someone, then ending up feeling obliged to help them every time, wearing my heart on my sleeve, worry about other people's thoughts, feelings, etc. too much, prioritizing money or time for others, even when it's not convenient for me. There's lots of comments here. Yes, thank you all so much.
Thank you. Yeah, the one that struck me there is the fear piece, right? It's like the fear of not being liked, which I know is such a hard one to say out loud. Fear of letting people down, right? But it's like I talked about in the beginning, it's that genuine need that we all have for belonging, and that fear that we're going to be rejected in the process, right? Of not saying yes. So yes, all really good feedback. I really appreciate the engagement. Feel free to continue putting any of your thoughts in there. At the core, people pleasing means putting someone else's needs before your own, which many of you understood very clearly there. All of you did. People pleasers are naturally in touch with the needs of others. They're seen as agreeable, helpful, and kind. Like I mentioned before, these are generally positive traits that we want to see in other human beings. But taking it too far has its pitfalls. And this is where it becomes that sort of toxic mindset that I alluded to. Because people pleasers are known for doing whatever it takes to make others happy, it can lead to people pleasers feeling emotionally drained, overwhelmed, stressed, anxious. And as a result of all of this, people pleasers, at least what I see, is they struggle with self-advocacy, which can lead to harmful patterns such as self-neglect and even self-sabotage, right? Which is when we kind of continue those thoughts, patterns, and behaviors that hold us back and prevent us from getting what we actually want. That idea of us hindering our own success. And what's interesting is like, this can be on kind of a conscious or even an unconscious level. What I'm hoping today is just by truly talking about this and having a dialogue and sharing these resources, that for all of you, you can be made a little bit more aware of what your tendencies are, and how to know, and how to really get and put this part of you in check, right? So these questions, I think, are really helpful, and I will be sending out, or Jillian will be sending out at the end of this, some additional resources, and you'll have access to a blog post which will have this set of questions in it. You'll also obviously have the recording too, but these are some important questions to ask yourself to really understand that, to see if you've exuded some of these signs of people pleasing. Do you have a hard time saying no? Do you often find yourself worried about what other people think? Do you find yourself apologizing often, even when you've done nothing wrong? I would add that. Do you pretend to agree, even though deep down you may have a different opinion? Do you feel ashamed or even guilty if you don't say no, or if you do say no? Do you worry that if you say no, people won't like you or they'll think poorly of you? Do you find yourself taking the blame even when it isn't your fault? And do you neglect your needs to do things for others? So I would say, as you can see from all of these questions, it's complex, but if you answered yes to a number of these, this might give you some indication that you might at some point in time suffer from people pleasing. So like I talked about before, I think it's important to not only define what it is, define what the signs are, but really understand the risks of this toxic behavior. While it might seem harmful to be a people pleaser, over time, this behavior can have damaging consequences. And it can lead to serious mental and physical health risks. The first one, lack of self-care. So I think, and I'm sure many people feel this way, I'm not alone here, self-care has been such a buzzword. What I mean by this is self-care in the sense of our need to relax, our need for our bodies to exercise, our need to nourish ourselves, right? Like, I'm not only talking about the, kind of self-care, which is, the face mask and the bubble bath and all of that, right? It's really those basic needs. And what we find is that people pleasers rarely prioritize this type of self-care because they put other people's first. They spend less time on the things that we actually all need as human beings to be our best, right? And as a result of this, right, if you're not relaxing, if you're not slowing down, if you're not nourishing yourself with healthy food, if you're not getting outside and moving your body even just a little bit, right, you inevitably are going to be prone to more health problems. Overcommitment. There is a saying, I'm sure you're all familiar with it: by pleasing everyone, you actually please no one. By saying yes all the time, people pleasers inherently overcommit. With less time, they tend to develop stress and anxiety. I saw a lot of that. I don't know, maybe I kind of read the meaning below some of your responses there, but this can really lead to a lot of that, and ultimately, stress and anxiety over time left unchecked can lead to depression and worse things. So important to call that out. Resentment, because people pleasers feel like they can never say no, they hold resentment, right? And that can be resentment for yourself, that can be resentment for the other person, but over time that damages our relationships, right? That's no way to have a healthy relationship. Exploitation. I know this is a very dramatic word, but with no limits on what people pleasers say yes to, what can happen is that people pleasers let people take advantage of them, or they allow others to take advantage of them, right? But the worst part about this is not everyone is good people, right? Like, there are people who will take advantage of people pleasers and they'll see them as easy targets. And so these are a number of risks. Obviously, the list could go on and on and on, but I think that these are important ones to point out because they impact all of us. They could potentially impact all of us. Okay, so putting an end to people pleasing, full stop, requires us to learn how to say no. There are several reasons why. You'll have more time for the things that are important to you. You'll have more time to the people that are most important to you. By saying no to the things you don't want to do, you'll actually have more time to say yes to the things that you do want to do. Your ability to deliver exceptional output will increase when you aren't spread so thin, right? There are, for all of us, there are 24 hours in a day, right? And do you really want to maximize that time, or do you want to be spread so thin that, what you're delivering is not quality work? And then ultimately, with fewer items just clouding your mind and fewer commitments, your mental well-being will inevitably improve. And so I think that these are, all the reasons why we have to learn how to say no. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how to do that in my next slide. Before I move on though, Jillian, are there any additional questions or comments that you feel like are important to call out?
We had a couple shares. Scott shared one pitfall that I have learned about people pleasing is that others tend to not believe you because they know you will always say or do exactly what you think others want. So they never really know what we really think. And Jack just kind of was speaking on the resentment also and being taken for granted.
Yeah. So I think that it's so true. Others won't believe you. I mean, you think about, whether this is in your personal life or if you're a leader or at work, right? Like, we have to learn how to set healthy boundaries, which I'm going to talk about too. And I'm going to provide some resources on that. It's, if you're just saying yes all the time, right? And that's the response. People are ultimately going to think that that's the default and that they can walk all over you. And then obviously, yeah, that leads to the resentment piece too. I want to point out here that this is hard work and it's also doable. And I hope that in kind of the rest of what I'm going to share today, that I can provide some things to hope for in all of this. So, how to say no. Here are a couple of strategies that I'm going to offer you. Obviously, like I mentioned in the beginning, this is a menu. You can choose what's going to work for you and what is not going to work for you. But these are some tips that I found to be helpful with my clients. So the first one is do a little bit of explaining. This isn't this is one that you can kind of ease your way into the no, sort of speak, right? So explain the predicament that you're in. It might be as simple as saying, look, I'm on vacation those days, or I have other plans. These are good enough reasons, right? You don't have to over explain, but do a little bit of explaining. No, because XYZ. I don't love this one, but I think it can be a helpful one for people to ease into and practice flexing that muscle of saying no. The second one, be grateful, but kindly refuse. I love this strategy because it actually demonstrates healthy boundaries while respecting that other person, right? That could sound like, I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I'm going to have to say no for now, but let's open the door for future opportunities, right? You don't even need to say that last part, but again, it leads with that gratitude. It leads with that kindness that people pleasers are so prone for, but then it also enables you to say no. Establishing a blanket policy. So this is something that I found particularly helpful for myself in a period of my life where I was spread particularly thin. I was working a very busy job and pursuing my master's degree at the same time. And there just wasn't really time for my social life at that point. And so what I did is I established a blanket policy for everyone that sounded like, I don't do social events on the weekdays until I'm done with my master's program, right? Like it was just kind of this blanket thing. And it wasn't that I didn't honor those friendships or those relationships or, want to be a part of them, but just, it was the same thing for all of my friends. It could sound like, I know another recent one is, now I'm at a point in my life where I have a 2-year-old and I want to soak up every minute with him that I have. And so my blanket policy is, I don't travel for bachelorette parties anymore. I don't, I want to spend money, I don't explain this part, but I want to spend my money on things that contribute to me and my family and my son. Right. And so those types of blanket policies can be really helpful and like thinking about what's important to you and what your boundaries are. And that applies to everyone, right? Like, it's just kind of that no, this is what I do. Blame your calendar. This can be a good one. I like this because it can sound like, I'll have to check my schedule and get back to you. And it gives space to pause, right? It's kind of, again, it's similar to that blanket statement, but you can say, look, I'll get back to you, right? And even if you're kind of sensing that it's a no or a maybe at that point, you can really take the time to go back and say, okay, yes, I've looked at my calendar and that won't work, right? And actually give you time to reflect and see, is this a decision that I want to make? Is it really going to serve me? Is it going to get me closer to my goals, right? And then the last one, which I know is, we're kind of advancing here, but no is a full sentence. You don't have to explain anything. This one is hard, I recognize, in terms of how do we recover from people pleasing, but I think it's a good one to remember, that we can say no. So, okay, so some tips and tricks. This is kind of the meat of, I think, what everyone here is trying to get out of today's session. While saying no is obviously a critical step in healing from people pleasing, there are a number of other steps that you can take to recover. And really the goal here is to find that healthy balance in helping others without sacrificing your own needs. So the first one, work with an ALV coach. Like I mentioned before, all of these things are tools and they're a menu for you to choose from. What working with a coach will help you do is really understand what tools are going to work for you, and possibly also open up other doors to figure out what is deeper beneath the surface, and really give you some good strategies in how to move forward. What I love about coaching is not only does it help you to take some action steps towards getting closer to your goals, whether that be the goal of recovering from people pleasing or something else, but what I found to be so profound about the experience is the new awareness that comes from sitting on the other side of a human being who is listening empathetically to you, and seeing you as a whole, fully functional person that can reach the answers themselves. So highly encourage working with a coach. I know we have some current clients on the phone today, and could not advocate for that enough. The second one, establishing your boundaries. We have a lot of resources out here on this topic. I know this again is another buzzword we hear all of the time. But at the core, if we are going to recover from people pleasing, it's important to know your limits and communicate those limits. Boundaries are for us. So be clear and specific about what you are willing to say yes to. If it feels like someone's asking too much, let them know it's beyond your limits of what you're willing to do, and just say no. Like I said, I'm going to share some resources around this, but really the first step is to kind of recognize what's important to you at this point in your life, right? Are you juggling that full-time job and graduate school right now? Do you have small children at home and that is leading you to have different priorities? Are you starting your own business and that is taking your focus and energy somewhere else, right? Be clear on what you need, and then that will help you define what you'd say yes and what you say no to. Small steps. This is something I believe any great coach would tell you. For people pleasers in particular, because we kind of have that perfectionism in us, these behavioral changes are big. They are big. We have to retrain our conscious response pattern while also teaching others around us to honor our boundaries, right? Like, this is a lot of information. This is a lot of rewiring that we're having to do. Because of this, start small. And it might sound like practicing saying no to smaller requests, first of all, right? Like, what's one thing you can say no to today that will become a yes to something else? It might even sound like not even saying no. It might even sound like challenging yourself to ask for something that you need, something small. What happens with small steps is that every time we take these small steps, it gets us closer to our goals, and it gets us one step away from that tendency to people please, ultimately, which will build your confidence. Okay, positive self-talk. Speaking of confidence, right? Like, this is one of my favorite tools and techniques to build confidence, and it can be applied to people pleasing as well. If you start to feel overwhelmed or tempted to say yes when you really mean no, remind yourself that you deserve to have time to yourself. You deserve joy. You deserve to spend your time and energy on the things that get you closer to your goals. It's okay to not have plans. This is something I've had to learn. I've had to teach it. And my clients have had to learn it too. If your date night plan on Friday is with yourself and someone asks you if you're doing anything, you are doing something. You have plans, right? You deserve that time. It's positive self-talk. Set goals. What I mean by this, and again, a coach can help you, is name your priorities. Where do you want to spend your time? What are you trying to accomplish? What type of people do you want to spend your time with? If someone is depleting your energy, go back to those boundaries, right? Like, this is very, very important. Pause. I talked about the power of the pause earlier. When someone asks you for a favor, tell them that you'll think about it and get back to them, right? I'll look at my calendar and get back to you. Let me think about it. By saying yes without pausing, we can tend to then go into that pattern of feeling, obligated and overcommitting ourselves. So by giving that space, we can actually decide if it's actually something that we really want to do. And, research shows that with decision-making, like, when we have a pause between that choice, it actually increases the decision-making accuracy. So I really encourage you to think about that a little bit more, what that pause is. And in that pause, asking yourself, is this something that I really want to do? And if I say yes, how stressed out will I actually be? Reciprocity. This one kind of came through, I forget who it was who made this comment, But, it's important to remember that strong, healthy relationships involve give and take. When you're the only person giving and the other one is just taking, it's no way to live, truly. Even if you enjoy people pleasing, which I know many of us do, it's important to remember that relationships are about give and take, and that you should also be getting something in return. Offer authentic help. So obviously we talked about how people pleasing boils down to the need to help. You don't have to give up being helpful and kind, and you don't have to say no just for the sake of saying no. The key is to understand your intentions, right? Don't help only because you want to get that approval from the other person. Keep doing kind things, but do it on your own terms, right? When we're able to shift into this type of service to others, it demonstrates authenticity for one, but it also helps you live a more congruent life as well. So I'm sure the chat is just buzzing. And I will come off video in a little bit, but I'd love everyone to revisit that experience of people pleasing, those examples that you provided in the beginning. And I would love to know, like, what, if anything, you do differently now and what you've learned from this webinar. Jillian, feel free to chat away if there's other questions in there too.
We don't have really any new questions
right
now, but we do have a thank you.
Okay.
You're
welcome.
People are coming in, they're learning to pause. To take a pause.
What I actually loved that they even paused before they wrote that, right?
Yes. I learned that saying no doesn't mean I'm unkind.
Yeah, and that one's so good too, right? Like, because, and I'm making an assumption here, but I would imagine a lot of people that are on this call are highly empathetic, right? That idea of like people pleasing and kindness, it comes from that need for belonging, but it's also an empathy piece, right? And think about when you've been told no before for a good reason, like you probably respect that person a whole bunch more. You empathize with them. Rather than if they were to just say yes and overcommit and then back down last minute, right? Like that's far worse off. So I love that one.
Scott shared, I learned that my wants and needs are also important. Heather says saying no to others means saying yes to myself. Jack, yes, people pleasing is the kryptonite of empathy. Blanket guidelines is a fantastic way to start and not feel guilty. Continue to assess my intentions to ensure I'm not saying yes for acceptance purposes. These are very powerful. Thank you all for sharing these.
They're great. Really, I absolutely appreciate just the thoughtfulness and the depth, and I hope that it's been really helpful. Just before we come into the time for Q&A, and I'll turn back on my video so that I can see y'all as well, but please get in touch. I'm Cait at alvcoaching.com. Justice put in the chat the consult link as well. We have 2-time-a-month memberships, 4-time-a-month memberships, and would love to hear from you. At this time, I'm not taking on new clients with some summer travel and things coming up. I anticipate that in the next couple of months that will change. So if any of this has resonated with you, or you like what I've had to say and you're interested in getting in touch, please email me, but also know that I'd love to support you. And then this is my practice of actually, practicing what I'm preaching here, right? I have to say no to now, but it might be a yes in a couple of months. So with that, and then of course, register for our upcoming events. We have a ton of really wonderful, all of our coaches are absolutely wonderful. And there's some exciting stuff coming up. So please check that out. And without further ado, I'll come off of my presentation here, stop sharing, and see if there's, come back. Oh, there I am. And come back and see if there's any other comments or questions. Feel free to come off mute, or I can continue to monitor the chat here and see if anything has come up.
Hi there, Elizabeth here. Something that came to my mind when listening was the separation between your personal life and your work life, how different people can be in those situations.
Yeah.
I specifically come from a hospitality background, bars and restaurants, and I'm very proud to say, first off, that while listening to this, I was like, you know what, I'm pretty good. But in the hospitality and work realm, I mean, how do you separate the idea of people pleasing and your livelihood? Does that make sense?
First of all, Elizabeth, I love your kitty. She's so cute. Yes, you know, this is hard. I'm curious, like, Justice, I don't know if you heard that question, but I feel like in sales, it's kind of similar in that it's kind of that yes culture, and like, we want to do what we're going to do to please, you know, go above and beyond. And I am curious if you have any take on this. I mean, I know certainly my sister works in hospitality, Elizabeth, too, and like the abuse that she can take in a customer service type of role. It's, I mean, people are shitty, right? And so you're right. And you kind of have to put this smiling face on. And I think what comes to mind for me is, you know, knowing that we all deserve a level of respect. We want to say yes to the, you know, the person on the other end, but there are certain things that you have to say no to, right? Or calling in your leadership, or, you know, using the time outside of work to sort of, you know, self-preserve and recover from some of that. Those are things that come to mind. Yeah. Justice, anything that comes to mind there from kind of that sales perspective?
No, yeah, those are all really good ones. And taking that time when you're not on always, just to reflect and kind of do a deep breath is definitely important. But, you know, that's really good point you make, Cait.
And I think, Elizabeth, you could do the, I'm going to check and get back to you kind of thing. Like if you're feeling, you know, super demanding, I mean, or if you're feeling that super demanding customer, I don't know. The empathy side of me too is like, gosh, if people are acting that way, there must just be something going on, you know. I don't know. I feel like you can learn a lot about people, how they treat others in the service industry.
Yes, for sure. But
that with kindness. Amen, Carolyn.
That resonates with me. I guess I was mostly wondering, and like, and I am impatient, I will say this, what's the quickest recovery from a sales perspective of people pleasing? But yeah, I guess it's just about being patient and going through the process. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And like, I think, you know, it can be so easy when you have those types of situations where it's like our emotions are, you know, I mean, all the bad emotions come out, right? Like the fear and the anger and all of these things. And it can be really easy to just dwell on it, as, you know, you can go home from work and just, it can ruin your whole night or your whole weekend. I mean, I know for myself, when like things like that happen, I can like totally dwell. And something that I found to be helpful with my clients is like giving yourself a limit on being like, be as mad as you possibly want. Like you can write down all your thoughts about it. but set a timer, like set a 5-minute timer when you're home, and you can just rage or like call a friend or like say it out loud to yourself, like all the reasons why you're so mad. And then when that timer goes off, like compartmentalize and say, the more energy I give this, it's taking away the energy that I could be putting towards something more productive.
I think that's a really good reminder, because the key word here is dwell. So yeah, having the 5 minutes of for your worry box is yeah. Thank you.
Of course.
And then Cait, we did just get a question in the chat, and it says, how do you deal with the fallout of when you finally say no and set limits with family members who are so accustomed to you saying yes to everything?
Yes. It's, the book that I recommend, that I'm going to recommend in the resources, it's a New York Times bestseller. It's called How to Set Healthy Boundaries, I think, by Nedra, and now her name is escaping me as I'm liking it. Anyway, it will be, I think I wrote it down here. Set Boundaries 5-piece by Nedra Glover Tawwab, I think is how you say her name. If you searched her, she's on a number of podcasts. She's fabulous. But what she talks about is that boundaries, it's like, not only is it this very like dramatic word when we think about boundaries, but like good and bad exist at the same time, right? Like boundaries are there for yourself. Yes, they protect yourself. That doesn't mean it's always going to feel good for other people, right? And it's, with that is going to come, it is going to be complicated, right? It's like grief and joy can exist at the same time, right? And like this idea that it's always going to feel really good, like boundaries do not feel good, right? They help you in protecting your peace, right? I think I would ask you, Patricia, how you deal with the fallout when you finally say no and set limits, and they're accustomed to you saying yes. It's going to probably be a period. It's going to be painful, but I would ask you, what led you to finally say no, and is that helping protect your peace? And if that's the case, then is it worth it? It's not easy. It's complicated. Family is just, when I look at that, Patricia, I'm like, I feel like we could have a whole coaching session on that. And there's so many intricacies I know about the dynamics that are going on there that are complicated. But I would ask yourself, am I still honoring my boundaries? And is this protecting my peace? And if so, I would say it's worth it. I hope that helps. Again, I don't know the ins and outs of your situation, but it's, I think that resource will help. And I think remembering that boundaries are for you, and it's not always going to feel good for everyone around you. That is, and that's a hard truth to recognize as a people pleaser. I hope that was helpful for you. Anything else? I'm kind of looking.
Thank you, Carla, for dropping the exact name of the book and the author.
Yes, thank you, Carla. Yes, done to protect my self-need. Sorry, I didn't scroll down, Patricia. I didn't see that. Patience, yeah. Great, glad to people please. Yeah, patience is it's a hard one to cultivate. Maybe we can put in, I can send another, a blog post around how to cultivate patience that might be helpful too as well. Well, everyone, you're most welcome. Are there any other, even if it's just thoughts or questions about Ama Vita, I don't know, Justice, did you have any kind of things that you wanted to share in terms of memberships or next steps with everyone? I think we have active members on the call today too.
Yes, we do. So. We do. Yep. No, we've dropped the links a few times, but everyone, this is recorded and all the resources mentioned and will be sent again. So you will have that for reference. If there's no other questions, we can give you guys some back some time here in your day, but we really do appreciate everyone coming and being so engaged with this and having the great questions. And thank you so much for your time today, Cait and Jillian.
Thank you. Yeah, I love all the questions and the engagement, and please feel free to reach out. And I wish everyone the best of luck and support, and come back to this at any time. It's there for you to have. So until next time.
Have a great day, everyone.
Have a good
Thank
one.
you.